Good morning from California, everyone. Welcome to Paloma AMA today. Today is June 22nd, Wednesday, 2022. And I believe yesterday was the longest day, depending on where you are on the world. Yesterday was the longest day of the year. And I think yesterday was the summer solstice. So happy summer solstice to everyone. I hope you got good vibes in and that your bags were not sinking too much as we continue in the exciting world that is blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And super excited today because today we have a new Paloma AMA on cross-chain AMMs. And we are hosting Socket and our rocking team from Socket to join us and chat about cross-chain AMMs and cross-chain and of course bridges. And I love this so much because this information, this is, we at Paloma are all about cross-chain technology, and we think this is the future for blockchain. So you're no longer going to be a blockchain engineer, you're going to be a cross-chain engineer. And super, just really pumped to have the Socket team with us. And Socket, who's from Socket talking to us today? Who's here? Who do we have?
Hey guys, this is me, Vaibhab, also go by VC.
VC, and thank you so much for joining us. And we want to say it's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to learn about Socket. And this is really, we just want to do a deep dive in some of the awesome thoughts that we have and around the topic. I'm just going to do a quick reminder for folks. This is going to be recorded. So if you are reading this in transcript, thank you very much for coming. You want to remember our host today is Socket, socket.tech. That's socket.tech. Please go to their site. Their thought leadership is amazing. You want to learn and see what Socket has to say about cross-chain technology, because I think they're going to be a leader in the space and we all want to work with them. And of course, we're Paloma. We're palomachain.com. We're a Cosmos SDK chain that will be, of course, using Socket as well to essentially control and broaden the scope of smart contract controls, of course, using the validator set. So even at Paloma, if you're a Paloma member, please, we want to be building on Socket as well. So check out their docs. You want to be able to send messages from Paloma to Socket and back. This will be something exciting in our area. So VC, let's talk about it as we jump in. Who are you? Give us the overview. How did you get involved in Socket? Tell us the story. Tell us your story and then tell us the Socket story.
Yeah, love it. Thank you guys for hosting us. I think one of my teammates, Rishabh, he's also in there as a listener. Maybe we can invite.
Yes, let's do it. Rishabh, where are you at? What's your, Thalima is running it. So if we can just make sure that he is promoted to speaker as well. Rashad, you here with us?
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks so much for having us.
Rock and roll. Thank you for coming. I saw Socket from my team, Crypto Cowboy, and I said, we need to have them on. This is awesome. I know you have a ton of stuff. Like, I can't tell everybody all the things you have planned. And I know I'm not supposed to talk about certain things, so I'm just going to shut up. I really impressed with what you guys have done. Super excited. And would love to hear the Socket story so that our community, which is fast growing community in Paloma, will know and start building with Socket, either directly or via Paloma. So questions we want to ask is, welcome. What is Socket? When did you guys come up with this? What is the Genesis story? See what I did there? Genesis story. And where are you guys at today?
Yeah, so kind of like the journey dates back like 3 years ago. I'm basically from India, which is like a third world country. So like everything is super expensive. I basically could not, kind of convince my friends to, try out the amazing stuff I'm working at on Ethereum and other blockchains. So I wanted to work on scalability, right? Kind of get like transaction fees to a level where people living in third world countries are also able to use like the awesome stuff that we are building. I was the first hire at Polygon, which was back then called Matic. We were doing like a bunch of like Plasma research back in the day. Unfortunately, like Plasma had some it was looking pretty good on research purposes, but not really in like practical purposes. It had some like weird assumptions due to which it could never take off. So like Matic internally went on to build like a POS sidechain, which is today called, Polygon POS. I was the lead contributor there. I was leading the tech team there. Back in the day, this was also like a fairly hard task. There was no Cosmos, there was no Tendermint. They were also kind of building alongside.
Right.
So I got to learn a lot there. It was super fun. I really respect like the whole Cosmos, Tendermint, software, and the ethos and like the design philosophy behind it. So yeah, I'm a big supporter of all of those things. But yeah, I still wanted to figure out like a way to have like, cheaper transaction without becoming a sidechain, because obviously we are taking like security hit here when we build like a sidechain, right? So I wanted to figure out like better ways to scale Ethereum. So back in 2019, someone posted like a ETH research post, which is this like forum where people, talk about research stuff, that we can probably scale Ethereum via ZKPs, which is like zero knowledge proofs. And I was like, this could work. It looked pretty good on paper. So I built the first implementation of a ZK rollup back in 2019. I presented that during like DevCon Osaka, which is like the last DevCon event, if I remember correctly, that happened. And like after that, I was hooked, right? Like once I built out the whole thing, I could see it work not only in like research, but also in like all the practical, areas. So as soon as like Polygon mainnet went live, I, kind of joined Ethereum Foundation, where I was, full-time working on rollups for about a year. I built the fastest optimistic rollup system there, which is called Hubble. It uses some like BLS compression stuff so that it's like the on-chain footprint for this optimistic rollup is like super small. Now this technology is being used by Optimism Arbitrum, not right now, but in their, coming releases.
Very cool.
So that was super fun. During this period, I got really interested into MEV stuff. I was trying to build like Flashbots, but on an application level. But then like Flashbots, like the whole initiative, started to happen. I joined Flashbot initially to, kind of help build like the first version of Flashbots. So yeah, that was super fun. Got to build like the first version of Flashbots, got to like kind of experience like the whole MEV space from the very, very start. That's why I think like while also like building bridges now, I have that, kind of perspective of like scalability plus like MEV resistance, which is like, kind of super important, because like if you have multiple blockchains, if you have multiple bridges, there are multiple areas of like MEV exploitation and things like that. So there's that extra angle that's kind of important to take care of, which kind of like is very supportive to the topic of conversation today, which is like why cross-chain AMMs are a bad idea. And yeah, would love to dive deeper into that. Rishabh, do you want to expand on the socket story?
Sure. I think I'll just add like some small things, right? As we started thinking about the multi-chain world, and when we were starting about this like multi-chain world started evolving, and we saw the rise of BSC, Polygon, and all of these chains, and huge ecosystem starting developing on all of these chains. And as we started realize, so what everyone or what every app basically started doing was just deploying the same piece of code on every chain, right? In silos, basically, right? Like, so Aave on Polygon is just like independent of Aave on Ethereum, right? So
that's right.
What this essentially means is a lot of like loss for the user, right? Like, so a typical user, if the user wants to use this Aave on Polygon, for example, they're interacting with this $1 billion of liquidity that exists on Polygon, right? On just Polygon, and not maybe the $2 billion liquidity that has that exists on Polygon plus Ethereum, right? And so that means I'm just borrowing at a much higher rate than I can potentially if there was like a unified sort of a world, right? And then similarly, even if let's say a yield optimizer, right? Like if I'm interacting with a yield optimizing protocol, it is just optimizing yield for me on just one specific chain instead of actually like optimizing for yield across these different chains, right? And then there are like UX issues that I that are like even more ridiculous, right? Like if I'm on, let's say, if I have funds on BSC, but I want to use an app on Polygon, I have to go through like a ton of friction just to get my funds there and then finally use that app, right? Like, so overall, even though we kind of scaled Ethereum or kind of had these, let's say, low cost environments and fast environments, leaving like security out of the picture right now, but even though we had all of these environments, right? Like we were not really in a much better world, right? Like, so, and that is why what we realized was, okay, we really need like these bridges. And like, so even in the real world, right? Like before there was like any communication or any transportation within different continents or different countries, like there was no globalization, right? And as soon as globalization started, like we all started sharing knowledge, we all started sharing resources. And like now we are in the world that we are in today, right? And like this is what we really expect like bridges to actually do for this multi-chain world as well, right? Like once we have these unified applications which can actually talk to each other across these different chains, it'll be like a game changer.
Got it. So first of all, it's amazing the experiences that you've had, both, working at Polygon Matic and the cutting edge innovation having to do, all the way from rollups and all the way to ZK, ZK snarks. First of all, congratulations. And I would like to say you guys have seen some shit. So now you have a vision for the world based on this background. If we were to sort of encapsulate the awesome Genesis story into this is what the world will be in a socket lens. So this is what the world will be in the lens of socket. what would that be? Would we say this is fully smoothless, seamless cross-chain interaction that is secure? Is it is it about speed, security, or just the UX experience? Like, what is the core of that vision here? Because I know there's so much you guys are doing in terms of making it better. But if we were to distill it down to like, hey, this is what this would look like, what would that be?
So this kind of might look impossible today, but this is what we think is going to be the future. We would kind of move to this environment where users don't even have the notion of a blockchain, right?
Got it. Yeah, very nice.
We would have Ethereum, we would have multiple L2s, but developers and applications, they would deploy on Socket, for example, right?
Right.
Internally, Socket would deploy this contract on multiple L2s. And kind of manage moving state and liquidity around these L2s, right?
Got it.
So as a user, you don't have to worry about scaling, bridging, etc. You just deploy and it scales automatically, right? Just to kind of, dive 1 inch deeper, let's say you are building like a NFT application, which sometimes need to be composable with something like Uniswap, right? We would deploy your contract on a rollup which is closer to an NFT marketplace, for example, right? OpenSea has its own rollup. We'll deploy your, contract application there. Whenever it needs to compose with something like Uniswap, which is like, let's say once a month, some part of your contract storage will be pulled and, kind of deployed on this other rollup, which has Uniswap deployed. This is what we think it would look like. It would look like a lot more like AWS serverless. You don't know, servers exist, but you don't manage those. You just kind of give your code to AWS. It does scaling, it does like interop, load balancing, everything. That's what we're kind of building towards.
And so if I were talking, so say we're going to talk to a Solidity engineer, I would say to the Solidity engineer, listen, once you use Socket, you can deploy and it will be wherever the contract needs to be. You don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to deploy it or deploying your separate, instance of your code onto Arbitrum or Optimism, for example. Socket will have your code deployed on Arbitrum and Optimism, and it will just run. It just goes. Okay. All right. So this is, and I think again, this is huge because you push the entire industry forward, because it's our view that there will be more chains, there will be more L2s, there will never be less rollups, there will always be more, and it becomes harder to try to track and to control wherever you need to be. I mean, one day you tell me I need to be on Arbitrum, the next day you tell me I have to be on Optimism, and I'm like, then, and then I'm on Matic, but then Matic has incentives, then I have to go to, like after a while I'm like, wait, we're not on Phantom. The pain, it is a terrible pain, because it's just hard to try to be everywhere at once. And we at Paloma share that vision that people need to make it easy, and we love this vision. So now we're 15 minutes in, beautiful Genesis story. And so we're interviewing one of the first few companies of the Matic Mafia. Is this good to say that this is Matic Mafia, Polygon Mafia, that, just like we had the PayPal Mafia, the spin-off of the companies that are coming off of Matic? Is it put in that position, or is that too much? Don't do that, Tarek.
I mean, I hope so. One day, one day we all become big. Right now, we are just like building out all of our visions, and hopefully we'll all kind of align.
Copy that. Understood. All right, let's jump into it. Topic of today: interchain AMMs. Bad idea. Bad. Cross-chain AMMs are bad. Okay, so for my friends at SwiftChain, to my friends at Crescent, friends at POV AMMs, to my friends at Osmosis. Okay, great. Sunny, if you're listening to this, we're going to work it out. Why are cross-chain AMMs bad? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, just to kind of come down that this is a more outrageous topic or like a headline than the reality, but that's what you have to do to kind of, get the attention around this topic.
Love it.
Like the reality is not that bad, but if you're not careful about this stuff, it could be, right? So kind of like talking about things from Genesis as we do here. When Uniswap originally started, it was looking really, really good, right? Like we could create markets for any asset. We could, deposit one asset, take out another. It's all good, right? A few years later, we are now seeing products like MEV protection. We are now seeing like explorers kind of show when like a user is sandwiched, a user is front run, a user is like background, things like that. So Uniswap was designed in like a era where MEV was not a thing. Today, it's a big topic. It's such a big topic that it could destabilize that particular change consensus itself, right? This is why like ETH2 is also being designed in a very MEV aware fashion. Now that we are, kind of aware of like the MEV consequences of your application design, I feel like going forward, if we are going to build like things in a cross-chain fashion, we have to be even more careful. Now, why, like I really flagged out like cross-chain AMMs is a bad idea. Let me kind of like put out what I mean exactly. So things like where you swap, let's say you have like Aave on Polygon and you want Compound on Optimism, right? This is a use case, right? What we essentially want to do, or what will happen in some cases, you would swap your Aave on Polygon for something like USDT. You will bridge your USDT from Polygon to Arbitrum, and then you would swap your USDT, which is now on Arbitrum, back to Compound, which is what the user originally wanted, right?
Yes.
And this would all happen in a single transaction from the source side. This particular design, it's MEV prone, right? There is like a good probability that a user will lose funds due to MEV in this particular method. The reason behind that is pretty simple, right? Whenever we do a Uniswap trade or a DEX trade, we send a transaction that says, hey man, here's some USDT. I want USDC in return. This is what you quoted, but I'll take this much as the minimum, right? So if like the minimum is like, let's say you are doing like 100 USDT to 99 USDC swap, the minimum, let's say you would define as 98. So the output is either you get nothing, which means you retain your, 100 USDT, or you get 98 USDC. These are the only two options that exist. Does that make sense generally?
Yes, it does. It does. You're losing. Yep. We see the loss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you kind of like define that minimum because prices could change from the time you send a transaction to the network to the time that transaction gets into a block, right? That's to account for that particular time delay, we define this like minimum bound, right? Now, if we talk about the bridging situation today, all bridges need to take in enough confirmation, right? Which means like bridging times can vary from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes, 20 minutes to 30 minutes, or like, whatever. It's long, right? Which means if you're doing like swap bridge swap in a single transaction, you would be defining the slippage for the second swap, the minimum received for the second swap, fairly low, right? Because due to the increase in time delay, you would be saying, hey, like in our previous example, we defined the minimum to be 98. You would say, I'm okay with 70 here, right? Because the prices could change way too much by the time everything is done.
Right.
So I do not want my transaction to revert on the destination chain. So I'll kind of, set like very low minimums. What this essentially means is as soon as the bridging is done, the second swap will happen and MEV bots will kind of like buy up the difference between like 98 USDC and 70 USDC. So they make like a really, really good buck off it. So this is the con, right? You will have to define like, higher slippages than normal, 2-3 times at least. And all of that money will go to all of these miners. So this is like, why it's a bad idea right now. The way to bypass this right now that we are doing on Bungee Exchange is do swap and bridge in a single transaction, then do the second swap in a separate transaction. Why this kind of solves the problem, for now at least, is because you would be setting the slippage for the second transaction at runtime. Meaning, when you are going to do the second transaction, at that point, you are defining the slippage for that transaction. Not during the first transaction, after which bridging, etc., all of that time kind of adds up. So that's some like kind of like download. I'll take a pause, answer some questions, and kind of dive in deeper if you want.
Yeah. So what we're saying is essentially we've articulated the problem is that you have MEV exposure because confirmation times in the bridging step is not going to be immediate, and in that time you are essentially at risk for increased slippage. Now your status quo is you just say, well, shit, life sucks, I'll bite the bullet, and let me try to set my slippage rates as low as possible so, I don't get screwed, but I don't want the transaction to revert because it says, hey, your price was too high. I have to set it low enough. Now, of course, the bots are salivating because they're like, look at this guy. He has no choice, right? He has to take the hit. We already see him. He's in the mempool, dark forest. Just look what can we carve off? Well, we'll carve off 20 cents. And suddenly now on the second transaction, once he's come from swap 1 now to bridge and then swap 2, he has less money. Too bad, life sucks. This is the pain and agony that we have to put up with in a cross-chain world. You're saying no longer do you have to put up with that pain and agony. What we're going to do is we're going to swap and bridge in first. And then because you do that transaction immediately, you don't have as much risk. Is it as much or you don't have any risk when it comes to the second swap? Is that the position? Have we zeroed out the risk entirely?
Yeah, we kind of zero out the risk, but take a hit on the UX,
Got it.
because the user would have to come back in and do a second transaction, right?
Got it.
So we
That's right.
take on that risk. We take on like a hit in UX, but we get really good efficiency to like a level of like a normal swap.
Got it. And first question I have is, this is awesome. I think because when we at Paloma, we're talking to folks who are trying to, for example, move between Ethereum and Phantom, because there are exchanges on Phantom and there are exchanges on Ethereum. And a lot of times, yes, watching the slippage due to transaction spikes, volume spikes is pretty much on Phantom, something that people talk about as a problem. It's kind of interesting to see it here, in the way you described the Aave compound example. It's very simple, but it is something that we've heard echoed from other players. Now, to dig a little bit deeper, the questions I would first have is, one, Socket is live, and currently, what networks are you live on that folks can actually take this experience today and sort of, use this as a solution?
Rishabh, do you want to share those details?
Sure. We are live on 9 chains today, all EVM for now.
Yep.
Ethereum, Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, XDAI, BSC, Aurora. I'm like forgetting one or two, but yeah.
It's okay. All right. And so, question for you: given this solution and you're already live, what are you seeing? Like, where are people most taking advantage of this MEV protection in the cross-chain swap that you have made available? What seems to be what the customers are saying? This is where, if you can share, some of the patterns you're seeing in people's behavior.
Of course. Yeah. So we've talked about two things before. I think right now what we are doing is that we are trying to do like swap and bridge together. And then we kind of prompt the user to do the second transaction, which does the swap on the destination side. Now, this kind of affects UX, right?
Yes.
And we've noticed on some chains, this finality occurs much more quicker than some others.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So right now we are developing an engine that kind of takes into consideration like the source and the destination chains, and kind of decides if it's possible to do a one-click thing here. Because in Cosmos also, right, we have Tendermint, which means like as soon as a block is created, it's considered final, right?
Right.
So these are like super instant finality chains. We don't have like a lot of confirmations here, which means that, cross-chain AMMs could be possible here, right? So in those cases, and in some other cases, we kind of allow the user to do like cross-chain, like swap bridge swap in a single transaction. Yes. We smartly detect this depending on like the pools that the users are swapping in, the amount of liquidity, the trade size, the chains that the user is interacting in, right?
Yep.
So right now you can go on Bungee Exchange or Zapper or Zerion, Embedded Wallet. We have a good amount of integrations from where you can access Socket. On there, you just, kind of, say, I have Aave here, I want COM there. It will do the swap bridge swap for you. If it's possible, it will do that in a single transaction. If it's not, it will kind of, take the more pessimistic route and, do a swap bridge and swap to safeguard the user.
It's awesome. It is absolutely amazing and very cool to see this at work. And again, the value proposition is unique because you guys are, again, anchoring it back to cost, right? So you have MEV exposure cost, which to ignore, again, will just bleed your pocket. But now that you can address it, it can be fixed. So question, for example, we had Volume, which is our parent company, just implemented Flashbots for one of our contracts, which is a Curve Chaser, which is also controlled by Paloma. So Paloma controls Curve Chaser, which actually chases yield on Curve. One of the questions folks were asking us is, hey, we're chasing yields on Curve L1. Can you guys chase yields from Curve on Ethereum L1 to Arbitrum or Optimism or Polygon, wherever Curve pools exist? And so, for example, if Polygon is running a promo on Curve liquidity providers, can we go from ETH to go capture that liquidity? Would Socket be something that our Paloma devs can say, hey, we can write, contracts that will use Socket to essentially, make sure that Paloma can chase yields across Curve ETH to Curve Arbitrum to Curve Polygon? Would that be a use case for us to say, hey, let's see if Socket can help us plot these paths? Or is that crazy?
Not crazy at all, dude. Like this is like the top use case that we want, to be built and be out there in the world. It just makes a complete sense, right? Why would you build like a yearn or like a yield optimizer that only optimizes on one chain where the yield is like kind of available everywhere, right?
Right.
Totally makes sense. Totally possible by Socket. Hit us up. We'll help you out. A good amount of people are trying to build this already. So maybe we can, kind of collaborate, share.
Wait, you mean we're not special? We're not unique. We're not. Oh my God. Because this is obvious, right? Everybody wants to go where the yield, where the liquidity is. We don't, and the incentives. I mean, we don't want to be stuck on Ethereum L1. We need to move, and we need help moving on that. And I think Socket is perfect for that. Okay, we're just out of time. I'm just going to check in quickly with our listeners if there are any questions from our listeners before I know it's 30 minutes. We want to be quick. I'll wrap up. So any hands from the listeners so far? You have 3 seconds. I'm counting down. 3, 1 hand, no hands. 2, 1. All right.
I think there is one question. Let me see if I can get just one moment here. All right, we could disregard. So I think we could go ahead and close it out.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
okay.
I wanted to. Sorry, this is.
I think Ben.
Yeah, I just want to ask.
Bet.
Quick thought. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Twitter Spaces on mobile does this thing where it like cuts you out while it's connecting you for like 30 seconds. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So I just want to follow up. Socket guys, good to see you. Thanks for the chat. I just had a follow up question. So the kind of the engine that you're talking about, which kind of uses the finality of the chains to maybe determine whether like it's feasible to do cross-chain swaps with the swap on the other end. I know we've actually talked about this privately, but like, would that mean that some of the research on ETH side for like single slot finality and other kind of questions around making ETH after the merge more, I don't know, finality is not the right word here. I think economically secure or something like that is like people have kind of minced words about it. But like, is this theoretically going to be possible for mainnet given some of those changes that are being mooted?
Yeah, I mean, our engine would not only take finality, it would consider the liquidity on both the chains, on both the pools, the trade size, a bunch of things, not just finality. To be honest, I'm not super clear on the concept of finality on ETH2. I keep hitting up like all of these ETH2 devs and like, I think it's not super clear to me, but potentially, definitely. So if we have like kind of instant finality like Ethereum or like Tendermint, 100% man.
Wait, okay. So just to add on to that point, and just to be clear for listeners who are catching up, what we're saying, this is an ETH2 conversation where Ethereum is going to be merged into the new chain that's be proof of stake. So the question really is around whether or not finality impacts in the proof of stake model versus our proof of work model changes how Socket works. Are we saying that it makes Socket better, or is it that Socket now comes down to a level playing field where, in proof of work where we had to wait for a certain amount of confirmation for quote unquote finality, what was your level? The concept of finality in the ETH2 world, does it change how Socket works, or does it even up the playing field and make it less problematic? Is that the question that we're asking here, just to make sure we're all aligned?
No, yeah, like the question is, yeah, I think like kind of the general idea is like the notion of finality kind of changes with ETH2. Does that make like cross-chain AMM a better idea?
Right. Got it. But that doesn't mean we don't have MEV in an ETH2 world, right? I mean, we have MEV in the Tendermint world. I'm assuming that MEV will still be a problem. Like people will still find ways to extract value. Yeah. Right? We call it VEV, validator extracted value. So it's going to be a thing because it's the way to make money. All right, VC Abhinav, I want to say thank you. So, wait, I'm sorry, got your names wrong. VC and Rishabh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect,
right.
Rishabh, perfect. Congratulations on Socket. Great history, great genesis, great story, great opportunity for adding value. We at Paloma, our devs want to use it because I'm sure if ETH1 EVMs that are still proof of work, or everybody who's moving to proof of stake, it's going to be more important to have more tools to go cross-network, cross-chain smoothly and fast, because you want to be able to control is what matters and scale is what matters. So thank you for joining us. We hope to have you on again, because I think this conversation is going to be very powerful again. And I know you have other stuff coming up in terms of releasing thought leadership for the community. Please continue to publish and to share. Thank you from Paloma. And thank you for everyone who's been listening. It's just an awesome presentation, and we hope to replicate it in the future again. And all the best for you guys in the cross-chain space. Thank you guys. Thank you, Socket.